Well, good evening. I was wondering about the title. When I first thought about the title, I said to him, what is it like to be a Metzora? There's something that sort of popped into my head. And he said, are you sure? Not necessarily the one that's most likely to attract. I don't know how any of you ever thought about being a Metzora. You know? But it reminded me of there's a story my brother-in-law tells. He's from England. My brother-in-law was born into a Yakisha family, but he's now a full Ger Chussid. So he was davening in the Yakisha shul, Munks, if you're familiar, in Golders Green, and I guess a friend of his was there, and he asked somebody in the shul, "Is there a mikveh I could go to?" And he said, "What's the matter? Are you a metzoraim?" But that was a little bit alien from us to be a Metzora, but I thought that it's an interesting exercise, a different way of looking at it. And maybe I'll start by introducing it with an interesting, why I started to think about it. This is a story that happened, I don't know exactly like this, but many stories like this happen, as we all know, of a Jewish student on campus in the past year in America, where he was a popular student, and all of a sudden he became less popular, and people would avoid talking to him, and nobody wanted to hear what he had to say. And then if he said anything that was particularly Jewish, or he would be, shamed for taking that terrible view, and moved into that, and he felt more and more to a place like he's, I think the quote was, alone in a room full of people.
That's a bad feeling.
And I thought of that student, and I thought of the context, I guess, in which the Jewish people in general seem to be finding themselves more and more this past year or two, or three, in which we are increasingly alone, secluded. I mean, it's at least to me, and I think some of the people here, frustrating. We got used to, so to speak, that let's say in America, that on the left, a lot of the people tend to be very anti-Israel and very even anti-Semitic sometimes, etc. But now that seems to be the trend on the right too. And people, let's say, for instance, like if you had asked me 5 years ago, I thought Tucker Carlson was the greatest guy. He was, I halfway hoped that he would get into politics and, maybe run for a high office, because I thought and now, like he's a vicious anti-Semite. That's crazy. And it's an increasing sense of being alone. And is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? But it is a thing. So that's kind of what prompted me to think about what it's like to be a Metzora. Okay, what does it say in the Torah? If you look at your sheet there in the first source, it says Metzora, basically what he has to do. I'm not going to go into too much into the halachic aspects of how you become a Metzora and what all the halachas are and how the Kohen has to see you. It's all, I think we talked a little bit about that last year, but the bottom line is, once a person is definitely a Metzora, there's stages till you get there, but once a person is definitely a Metzora, so the din is, Badad Yoshev Mechutz Lamachane Moshavo. He has to sit alone, outside the camp. Isolation, solitary confinement, if you will. But
He's not confined, he's outside.
well, we're not even really supposed to be with other Metzoraim. Even though we'll talk about a little bit later, the Haftorah is a very interesting one, where we talk about the Arba Metzoraim who are hanging out together. Who's Chazal tell us? Well, we'll talk about the Haftorah later. What? What? It was a family. It was Gehazi and his sons.
But you could, Metzora could walk around wherever he wanted to.
What?
It wasn't confined.
It wasn't house arrest.
Where are you going to go in the desert?
Outside of a place.
Where are you going to go in the desert? I don't know. I don't even know how they hang out there. I mean, with the desert was the first completely climate-controlled, beautiful environment, and air conditioning, shielded. I guess he had his tent there, but he was out there. Right? And we have that idea of being alone. And that's considered to be a big punishment. In fact, I'll just remind you one thing we talked about last year, that Rav Hirsch has such an incredible insight on the whole Metzora. I'm holding myself back, not going into Rav Hirsch, as to say. I think it's very worth reading, but his commentary. But one of the questions he asks, he says, is why does a person who has tzaras from head to toe completely, so the din is tahor, right? That sounds very strange. So first of all, he proves from that it has nothing to do with that Google Translate with leprosy. It's nothing to do with any sickness. It's not because he needs to be in quarantine because it's contagious. It's nothing to do with that. That guy should be more contagious than anybody, and then he's tahor. So that's one of his biggest proofs for that. But he says that basically why does a person get metzoras? Okay, so what? People think Lashon Hara, and that's certainly one of the reasons. But in fact, the second source, the Gemara in Erchin, it says, Al Shiva Dvarim Negayim Vayim. It comes from 7 different things that you could get tzaras. What are those? First, Lashon Hara. Okay. Second, Shvichus Damim, a person who's involved in murder, or in that, and Shvichus Damim isn't necessarily just actually killing somebody, it's also killing somebody's reputation, slandering somebody, giving somebody, making a person feel that way. Shvua Shav, swearing falsely. Gilui Arayos, okay. Gasus Haruach, an extreme arrogance. Gezel, stealing. And Tsaras Ayin, and being stingy, right? Jealous, stingy. And the Gemara lists a few other things. A person doesn't pay his workers on time. A person who is guilty of ona, which is they're basically giving people a very difficult time in the way they speak to them. Basically, if you want to file all of those under one rubric, what would you say in the words of a kindergarten teacher? Does not play well with others. Right? This person does not get along with others. He is somebody who's shown by his behavior. There's somebody who doesn't care about other people, tramples on other people, hurts other people, shoots off his mouth, Lashon Hara, the most famous one, just for the pleasure of saying a few, doesn't because it's fun or some kind of perverse pleasure. We all know because unfortunately we all engage in it sometimes, but that somehow it's pleasurable to say something bad about somebody else. For that moment of pleasure, you can destroy somebody's reputation, certainly their feelings and their, but that's about what?
Antisocial behavior.
It's what?
Antisocial behavior.
And it's all antisocial behavior. So therefore, Rav here says, what is this about? Metzora basically it says, a person who's guilty of these things has forfeited their right to live within society. They've broken the social contract. They're excluded until they learn, that how to behave with somebody else. And once they become, they've gone through tshuva, and only Hashem knows when that time is, that they come to a point where they can re-enter society, having eaten humble pie and learned, that they need other people. Then and they need to behave within other people. Then they can come back in. That's when they become tahor. However, sometimes it could be that somebody is like my mother-in-law likes to call me, a curmudgeon, right? A curmudgeon, right? The guy who says "bah humbug," the guy who doesn't really care. He doesn't need anybody, etc. What? Crusty old guy, right? Grumpy, right? All that sorts of things. So such a person, maybe he's going to get to say that he lives without any other feather. He's going to say, "Great, I don't have to be with all those idiots, those jerks, those losers. I can be by, So for him to be excluded and to sit in solitary, you're not going to accomplish anything. He thinks he's getting a reward. But such a person, what? Right. So that person, the only way maybe he's going to be completely white everywhere he walks. Everybody's going to see what's something wrong with him. Maybe that'll wake him up. That's Rav Hirsch's beautiful shot in that. Okay. He also says, I can't help myself. He says, very interesting. The whole topic is called negaim, right? What's a nega? What is it? To touch. That you're getting a touch from God. There's something wrong in what? In the ore, in the skin, which is, the skin is basically the organ in the body which basically defines the interface between me and the rest of the world. Everything inside my skin is me, everything outside of my skin is not me. Right? So that thing, that's that part that has to do with something in the in the world, that there's something wrong with it. There's something diseased about it. With the way you're interfacing with others. Okay, I hope I gave you enough motivation to go look at Rav Hirsch's commentaries. Incredible. So anyway, so that all of those things, because of those reasons, a person can be badad, has to be outside. But it's not just a person who is badad, but as I started talking about at the beginning, it could be groups, and in fact, it could be the nation of Israel. And if we look at the book of Eicha, right? So the book of Eicha talks about what happened, after the Churban, and what's the first word, Pasuk Aleph, Perik Aleph of Eicha? Eicha Yashva Badad, right? How did it sit alone, right? Of all the various, go on to list many, many different things in the book of Eicha, but like the first thing it talks about is the fact that it's alone, and that was something painful, that it's alone, that doesn't have any. It feels deserted. It feels without. It just occurred to me. I think. I may have talked about this here before, but I've thought about this question often, which is, who suffered more in the Holocaust, the Jews of Eastern Europe or the Jews of Western Europe? And they both suffered terribly, so that's not that question. But if you look at it from one perspective, there's no question many more and a much larger percentage of the Jews who were killed were from Eastern Europe, from Poland, from Russia, from Lithuania, from Hungary, from all those places, right? Most of the Jews of Germany, or a large percentage of them anyway, got out. They suffered a lot, but they Baruch Hashem, my father got out, my grandparents got out. My father, from my father's family, it was a very big family, and there was only one member who didn't get out. What? First they were encouraging him to go, right. Then they closed the doors, etc. But most of them got out. Did you see that snippet that was being sent around recently?
About Berta.
About this Israeli Bodenheimer? About his grandparents who went out and came back. You should see. If you didn't get it, let me know. I'll send it to you. It's very powerful. So anyway, what?
The Western Jews thought they were part of society.
Oh, so that's the other side to it.
The Eastern European Jews never felt that.
They always thought these monsters from the east had come and done all these terrible things to them. But the German Jews, till just yesterday, these were their friends, their neighbors, their business associates. They were, and as we know, Germans generally are very nice, decent, good people who treat everybody politely, etc. Right? My father-in-law, my grandfather fought for the Kaiser. Yeah.
It wasn't protection.
What?
It wasn't protection.
Yeah, it was. In a way, they saw that whole. I know, but I don't know how much you know Yekis, but Tim, if you know Yekis, you know that they love Germany more than we love America. That was like, they were there, first of all, for 1,000 years and much longer. It was very much in their blood and everything. And they saw that whole world just turn on them. And all this, in a short time, they became subhumans and what? So who suffered more? I don't know. The point I'm getting to is here, they felt very alone all of a sudden. Right. From what they knew. Okay. So that's being alone. Okay. Is also another interesting source in the Torah where it talks about being alone, which may or may not be such a bad thing. In the so-called, I guess it was a prophecy of Bilam, right? Where Bilam talks about the Jewish people, so he says all kinds of things, and intending it to be, well, he intended it to be a curse, but it came out, everything that he said is a blessing. He said, Hein am levadad yishkon. Saying that word again, levadad.
More description than
It was a description, sure, but it was, I think, more than that. And we could talk for a long time about what that verse means, and we'll talk about it a little bit here. That they were a people who dwelled alone, in a way that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be a people who dwell alone, in the sense. And again, Rav Hirsch talks about that a lot, where he talks about what it means to be holy, where he, unlike others who felt that a holy Jew is supposed to be somebody as divorced as possible from the outside world, and having nothing to do with the outside world, and the outside world is one big Sahara and all the things in the outside. He did not hold that way. He held Tamar Derech Eretz. He held that the general world has a lot of good things in the secular culture and a lot of good things in the sciences and in the arts and et cetera, that we should learn to appreciate. And we need to be able to be part of that. He by Rav Hirsch, the ultimate Jew was what he called a mensch Yisrael. Mensch Yisrael, which means to be a mensch, which means to be a mensch. We all know what that means. To be a good person, to be somebody who's a wonderful citizen of the society that you live in, to somebody respected by all, having good ethical values and a good person, not somebody who's walking around causing Shul Hashems, which all too often happens, as we know, with some of our co-religionists. To be a mensch. And at the same time also be Yisrael. That the ultimate thing is to be a Yisrael, to live by Torah. He says in several places, his credo of Torah and Derech Eretz, but the main thing is Torah with Derech Eretz. Of course, if it's a contest, we have to go with Torah. But it has to be together with Derech Eretz. Right? So Mensch Yisrael, so that describes, he says, Hein Am Levadad Yishkan, that kind of describes the dance we have to do, which is to live with them, but also apart. We go and we work and we have good relations with the co-workers, and we are very pleasant with them, and we like them and they like us, but that doesn't mean we go to the bar and drink with them. That doesn't mean we go to their parties. That doesn't mean we say there's certain things that we do with you and certain things we don't do with you. A certain place, there's a line which is very subjective and depends on the time and place, but we have to cultivate that sense of being apart, of being with them and being apart. So all this fits together, and I wanted to explore that a little bit today, what that's about. Okay. So first of all, so another aspect of it is that there is in the Parashat Tazria Metzora, and when I was in Yeshiva Spring Valley, I think my Rebbe first started, when we got to that part of the Chumash, started learning Parshas Tazria with us, and after one day he said, we skipped to Parshas Achrimos. We were eighth grade boys, we couldn't handle this stuff, right? But a lot of Parshas Tazria Metzora is about all the laws of, first of all, a woman who gives birth, right? And then it's about this is all about different forms of tumah. Why a woman who gives birth has tumas yoledes? Fascinating topic. Again, ayin reverse. I'm not going to go there, but it's and then a lot of it's about the dinim of tzaras, and then it goes to all of the dinim of zav and zava and nida and balkari and all the other things, all the other forms of tumah. It doesn't go through the laws of tumas mace. That's reserved for Parshas Chukas, pretty much, but. But Parshas, so what's the difference between the din of a zav and zava and a metzora? So there are many differences, but one difference is that a nida and a zav and zava are also excluded, but only from the Beis HaMikdash, right? Right? They could go into the Machne Levia. They can't go on the Har HaBayis, right? The Tamei Meis can't go into the Beis HaMikdash. The Zav and Zava can't even go into the Har HaBayit, which is Machane Levia, and the Metzora can't go into Machane Yisrael. That's important, by the way, for those who are, I don't know if any of you entertain the thought of visiting the Har HaBayit someday, without getting into that topic, but to the extent that it's permissible only if you go to the mikveh first, and so that you're not Tamei Zav and Zava, or Nida. Then you can go on. So what do we see? That there's an exclusion. It's of that. So and also we talked about a metzora is basically excluded from society. It has to be alone. As we all know, as a nida and a zav and zava also are excluded, but only pretty much excluded from intimate things. Yeah, the metzora kind of loses his belonging. He has to be isolated. He can't be at all within society. What? So going back to Eicha again, that's pretty much the way he views himself, or the nation views themselves, and how the outsiders view them.
Is that actually supposed to be the people or the the city of Jerusalem or the
The first pasuk is Ha'ir, right? Echa Yeshua B'dad Ha'ir Rabasiyam. But of course it's about the people too. Sure. Cities don't have feelings, so to speak, although Yerushalayim supposedly the Kotel has feelings. There's all these songs about that, but it's basically about the people. And then there's yet another fine time that we find in Tanakh, which we all know about, where somebody's considered to be alone, and that's given to us by one of our biggest fans, Haman, right? When he went into Achashverosh to try to claim that the Jewish people should be destroyed, so what did he say? Yeshno, in Hay over there, in the source 5, Yeshno am echad mefuzar u'meforad ben ha'amim. There's a people who are mefuzar, they are spread out, u'meforad, and they are separated. Ben ha'amim, between all the nations. V'dasehem shonos kolam v'dasehem, they have their own laws, they don't keep the king's laws, they do that, and they're like, so usually you mean that they're these weirdos, they're like the gypsies, they're people who
no value.
don't get along with anybody, they're, part, what does the king need them for? And that's certainly something, Haman was just not saying something that was often said by our enemies over the years, so we're this outside group, we're not necessary, we don't belong with them. Of course, Hitler, Yimach Shemai, said similar things, of course. And, till today, really. I mean, the Arabs, the Persians are, saying that we're this nation, that we're separate, that we don't belong here, we're different than them. But it's also, and Chazal tell us, that was one of Haman's criticism, was part of it was real. I mean, he was not saying the things weren't true, that we were meforad, which means we had no unity. We were separate, right? Today over here, are you here now on a short trip or what? So all over the country, especially last year, there were signs, rak b'yachad ninatzeach. We're only going to come back if we come back to be united. And I think most people understand that, even if we can't understand exactly why October 7th had to happen, but we know that on October 6th was big problems here of disunity, and it was headed towards a civil war. It was pretty bad. So that's been the case many times throughout our history, that when we've been separate, when we can't get along with each other, going all the way back, right, to Yosef and his brothers, and ever since then. What? Kain and Hevel. Okay, Kain and Hevel is a human thing in general, but certainly Yosef and his brothers. That's a whole drasha for Pesach, etc., and Karpas. Without getting into that, but when we can't get along with each other, that's a huge problem. So we are miforad, and it doesn't only affect that there's a kitrug. There's about that. It's a bad commentary on us when we can't get along with each other, but also I think we all sense that, that we can't feel a sense of unity. It's not good. But are there times that it is good? I started to say before that there's this idea of Bilam saying that there's a time that we felt that we are that we have to do that dance of being alone a little bit. And that's certainly being alone from Vadad Yishkan. We have to know when we're ourselves and not sometimes with us and sometimes without them. There's this sense of being alone. There are times when that's necessary, right? A sense of aloneness. And then when I was thinking about this, I certainly was thinking, where do I have it back here? Yeah. I certainly was thinking about this. I was thinking, but it's probably one of the most famous things that Rav Soloveitchik wrote. I don't know if anybody read it. It's a hard book to read. What? Hard book to read? Yeah, he's very, very fancy, philosophical, words that you need a dictionary to understand half.
Now it's easier.
Right. But it's amazing. His English was amazing, given that it was not his native tongue. But a lot of it was also his training as a philosopher, and et cetera, where he talks a lot of those Latin words, and et cetera, et cetera. But he talks about a lot of things in that book. But I mean, maybe it's almost summed up, perhaps, by the first few words of the book, which are The nature of the dilemma can be stated in a 3-word sentence. I am lonely. Right? And he's saying that I don't intend to convey that I'm alone. Thank God, I've been friendship and love of many. I meet many people. I talk, I reach, I'm nice, etc. Surrounded by comrades, acquaintances. Yet they don't alleviate the passional, I didn't know that was a word, passional experience of loneliness, which trails me constantly. Lonely not because I feel thrust away by anybody, or not even including my most intimate friends. I sometimes feel like it says in Tehillim, Ki avi ve'imi azavuni v'Hashem yasveni, that my father and mother have even forsaken for me. An strange, absurd experience, engendering sharp and nerve-aiding pain, on and on and on and on. He talks about his sense of loneliness as a religious, as a homo religioso, right? as a religious person, as a person standing in front of God, as a person looking at the world around and what most people are busy with and how most people live their lives, and him trying to take his relationship with God seriously, that it's a lonely path. It's not something that somehow he feels that being shared by too many other people. There's one other, where's that other quote I wanted to give to you here? He says, he looks upon himself as let me spell out this passional experience of a contemporary man of faith. He looks upon himself as a stranger in modern society, which is technically minded, self-centered, self-loving, almost in a narcissistic fashion, scoring honor upon honor, piling up victory upon victory, reaching for distant galaxies, seeing in the here and now sensible world the only manifestation of being. What can a man of faith like myself, living by a doctrine which has no technical potential, a law which cannot be tested in the laboratory, steadfast in his loyalty to an eschatological vision whose fulfillment cannot be predicted with any degree of probability, let alone certainly, what can such a man say to functional utilitarian society which is secular-oriented and whose practical reasons of the mind have long ago supplanted the sensitive reasons of the heart? You get this sort of the sense of what he's talking about. What?
They go secular, they just become religious, and everyone's challenging them. Why do you need that? And why is that important? And who does that? And you know, and you're a kid. You're trying to defend yourself, but you do stuff. And it was a very hard, isolating experience. It's very hard to be that way.
Sure.
Stand up and, you know.
Certainly somebody like yourself who came from a very different type of society. It's a lonely path.
But nobody got this. It's really weird. It's kosher, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely lose friends along the way.
You do.
Yeah.
Because you can't eat with people anymore.
That's true. Even a very big social thing, you became long.
Even family, even close friends. It's difficult. And to be perfectly honest, maybe this is just me, but I feel lonely. But not in the sense. Oh, thank you.
Never mind, it isn't
I feel lonely in the sense of hashkafically, in this community, but in general, I feel what yucky thing is one thing, but more, I don't fit into the Haredi world, and I don't quite fit into the Dati Lumi world, and Lonnie's afraid I'm going to bash people. I'm not bashing anybody now, but I'm just saying there are many things about the Haredi world that drive me insane, and there are things about the Tilumi world which are also not things that I'm used to, and not quite where it is. And
this is the beauty of Minyan.
What?
This is the beauty of Minyan.
Minyan?
Minyan de-individualizes the person. You with all your individuality, and I was mommy, and we're able to come together and create a new whole of the Minyan and still be Oived HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Okay. But that is a beautiful thing. I like it. Is a nice, it's certainly, and it's not just a minyan. It's, I think it's part of what it means that there's 12 tribes. I think some people think that all the tribes were the same. Chazal tell us not. Each one had its own style, its own way. I don't know if this one is Ashkenaz and Sfarad and Hasidic and Misnagdic or whatever, but whatever the equivalents were, they were all different ways of serving Hashem. They had their own different aspect. What? It's a good thing that we can, so to speak, despite our differences, or in fact celebrating our differences, right? Being able to come together and serve Hashem. I once heard somebody put it very beautifully, that we said, "V'chulam v'kablim aleihem o machut shamayim ze mizeh V'notnim rishus zel hazeh. Lakdish liyatzim. What does that mean? I get Malchus Shemaim from you, not just from Hashem. And I get and grant permission to you and you to me. That I can't really serve Hashem unless I have you serving Hashem your way and you serving Hashem your way. And we all coming together, it's to serve Hashem together. That's how we can come together in this minyan that you're talking about, kind of way, etc. What? Arba minim, certainly. Arba banim, there are many. Right? Sure. Okay. So there's this sense of, despite being lonely, right? There is a certain loneliness, which is, he says in the book, right? There's no answer to this loneliness. He thinks that even though doesn't have answers, there's value in describing the issue and the tension that people feel. But
is that for human beings in general?
Like, is it an existential?
Does everyone have that sense that they're different from it, like they're unique and they don't have a...
I don't know. I think the more sensitive a person is, and the more a person is concerned about, not just going with the herd and not just following. So some people, they just want to do what everybody else does, and they look at somebody who doesn't fit into that box as weird, right? It's,
I mean, how about Rabbi Soloveitchik?
He certainly was. He was a very unique person. He was a Rosh Hashiva of the highest level, but he was also a philosopher of the highest level, and he was. He was, in all various communities, didn't know what to do with him because he didn't fit into the boxes of everybody else. What? Yeah.
It's like in Israel, there's no black hat and colored shirt category.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I wish. I think there should be, and that's another conversation. And I wish I was part of a community that was forming that way. But it's
The
here we
lonely
are.
man of faith. I think it's because of his faith.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also, of course, part of it. That have a relationship with Hashem. So I know we're getting a little bit late, so I want to start drawing somewhat to a close here. But I think it's a fascinating topic, and going through that a little bit more. So we have an interesting one. I thought that one key to it perhaps was, where's that sheet here? Going on into what was going on in source 7 there, of the Arba metzoraim. What's the story, briefly, the Haftarah that we read? I think we read that Haftarah this week. It's the Haftarah of Tazri and Metzora, but I think... Parashat Chodesh? Okay, so we don't read it.
But we would read it.
We would read it.
Otherwise, right. We would otherwise.
It's Rosh Chodesh Echad B'Shas HaShamayim Kisi.
Yeah.
Okay. But that story is a fascinating story, basically, of the four metzoraim who were sitting outside the city, and this is at the time when there was a tremendous siege, right, going on of the city, and there was starvation and people were simply dying, etc. And for a long time, these metzoraim are sitting, despite the siege, they're sitting outside. You can just imagine the scene, Yeah, so he was sitting outside with his 150,000 troops, and they didn't want anything to do with these lepers either, right? So they were sort of sitting there. And then the point is that they were out there, and they were having this tremendous. And then all of a sudden they woke up in the morning. They heard this tremendous noise at night, and then in the morning, and there's quiet from the camp of whoever it was, right, of the enemy. And they didn't know what to do. And then they finally said, we're starving here. Let's go over there and give ourselves up there. And then, and they said, how can we do that? They'll kill us. Well, we're dead anyway. So we might as well go. And then they go, and they find there's nobody there. That they all had, it's not Sancheir. They had run away. Sancheir's folks had died.
Yeah.
Right. This is Aram. Right, it's not Sancheir. So they'd all run away and left a tremendous amount of food, etc., and all their supplies there. And first they come in, they start seeing all these extra foods. They start gorging themselves for hours, and right. And then one of them finally realizes, maybe there's enough here for somebody else also. There's all these people in the city, right, who are, right? And that tells you why they were metzoraim, how much they cared about other people. But they finally, even them, but even that, right, they went in and they told everybody else. So that's that story, right? They said, Lo kein anachnu osim, we're not doing the right thing. Hayom hazeh yom besorah. Today is a day that should be a great day of people knowing, and they finally went in, and etc., and the other parts of the story. So, there's this aspect of it that I think maybe it may help me, think about one other, to tie this in with one other thing that's going on right now, and et cetera. This week we had Yom HaShoah, whatever you think of it without going into it, but certainly the Holocaust is on a lot of people's mind, et cetera. And that was a time when people felt very much badad, right, alone. And even, and you can imagine there was a particular aloneness, after the Holocaust, really, in the aftermath, when the survivors, and I spoke to, guilt, but there was, I wasn't thinking about that so much, but, in the shul we were in before, there was a lot of survivors, and we had to talk to a few of them. First of all, they had hoped for all that time, we're going through this horrible thing, well, when this is over, we'll be reunited with our families, and for most of them, that didn't happen. Well, they found, they went, they searched, they looked, they go through, there were these lists always of people who survived, and, and there was that sense of aloneness. And then there was the aloneness, some of them went back to their old town to try to reclaim their house, etc. And meantime, Al-Gaiman moved into that, and the less people want to see how they're back here to claim that some of them actually were killed when they came back. Again, a very sense of, and knowing that the world had basically done nothing to help them, and rejected them. With even the United States, the St. Louis, all these stories, and so there was a sense of being alone. And then a lot of them were herded into the DP camps. Again, the world didn't want to know from them. And then, Baruch Hashem, brought to Eretz Yisrael. And there was a sense of that we're alone, he said with the minyan, but they're alone, but at least we're going to be alone together here. And in fact, I think it's interesting, also in terms of next week, of Yom Ha'atzmaut. I'm thinking about this, because, again, the whole topic of Medinat Yisrael and Herzl, etc. A long topic. Not going to do it now. But one basic idea. A lot of frum people have all kinds of tainas on Herzl. I think Herzl was a great man. I think Herzl was a tinuk shenish, but he didn't know anything. He had no contact with anybody from when he was growing up. He was a totally secular Jew. Well, he was motivated by one thing. Everybody knows, right? He was going along as a journalist, and he got very excited about the Dreyfus trial. And what he saw was when the tremendous anti-Semitism that came up, right, that there's something going on here that he wanted to solve the problem of anti-Semitism. And he went through, and that was really all he wanted. It wasn't pro-Torah, anti-Torah. No, he wanted to solve the problem of anti-Semitism. And he had many ideas. His first idea is we should all convert to Christianity, right? That didn't go real big with his fellow. So, right.
He didn't make up that.
Okay, but that was one of his first solutions. And then he came up with the idea of a Jewish state. And first there was a question of should it be in Madagascar, and should it be Uganda. My favorite one was in Grand Island, New York. There was talk for a while. That would have been great if we could go to the Kotel on the way to Niagara Falls. It was, but he saw that even amongst the very secular brethren, there's nowhere else that we could be at peace people except in Yerushalayim. Even people like Ben Gurion, did a lot of bad things, but to his credit, in the 48 war, he is the one pretty much who said, a lot of people were advising him, Yerushalayim, it's so hard to keep Yerushalayim there. If you know a little bit about the way that Yerushalayim was in a siege and it was cut off, and all people, and a lot of people were just saying, give it up. Most of the country is Tel Aviv, and the rest of it, let them have it. And he was saying basically, without Yerushalayim, we don't have a place in Eretz Yisrael. Jews, we cannot give up on Yerushalayim. So it was a sense of coming together, and the basic idea was, will never be, what's the idea of a Jewish state? No matter what you're going to do, there's always going to be anti-Semites. Maybe if we have our own states, we'll be alone, right? We won't be in their face, they won't be in our face. We can do our thing, they can do their thing, and leave us alone. Of course, whether that's worked out, some say that the biggest source of anti-Semitism today is the state of Israel. Yes, no, but anyway, that's what he wanted. And in many ways it did work, right? And that's a lot of what we, all of us here are benefiting from, the fact that Baruch Hashem, we have Medinat Yisrael, and we have this place, and we have a place where all those people could come to. That sense of being alone could be it's we're alone among the nations, but we're also, in the positive sense, where am lebadad yishkon, where that nation that dwells alone, bagoyim lo yitchashav, who amongst the nations isn't counted, although it's amazing how much we are counted, but that's another aspect to it. So I just to close with one idea that I thought of, that if you have a very precious stone, right, a beautiful gem, and you want to put it, and you have a bunch of other things about it, and you put it in its own setting, apart from the other things. So is that good? Is that not good? I mean, maybe it would be better if it was with everything else, but putting it by itself helps it, keeps its integrity, its specialness, its value, etc. And so we, the Jewish people, many times we've been forced to be alone. But although it has its difficulties and it's painful sometimes, but sometimes that's what's actually kept us going, that we've been able to retain that sense of aloneness. If we didn't have that sense, we would have assimilated a long time ago. We would have disappeared, right? And it's and that ability to be alone and separate our aloneness, in a sense, is a big bracha. And those are with what?
It relates to the Metzora. So the Metzora can learn to use his or her aloneness.
Well, it's supposed to be a time that they're supposed to learn how to appreciate, being within society and that they've been rejected from, and to become back. So, again, I don't know if it was a great title, what it's like to be a Metzora, but hopefully it was some interesting things to think about.